So you just sat down with SEC Chair Paul Atkins this morning, and it comes right on the heels of this announcement from the agency yesterday that they're revamping their proposals on how it should handle crypto. Now, to start at a high level, what did you talk about this morning?
So there were a lot of the topics in the meetings, ranging from transfer agency, which is a requirement for how equities and assets can be moved from different individuals and firms, onto compliance. Compliance was discussed, interoperability across chains was discussed, and also what can be done and what are the factors for having firms in the US do tokenization more so inside the US rather than outside of it. So I think there's now a very serious effort underway by the SEC at multiple levels to solve many of these open questions on transfer agency compliance, interoperability, and I think it's all seeking to culminate in more tokenization in the U.S. Economy rather than outside the U.S. economy, which I completely agree with as being the right goal.
And what did you want to get across to Chair Atkins in this meeting?
I generally want regulators to understand that they can enter a new world of automated and embedded regulation because smart contracts, which are the mechanisms that actually manage the assets and hold the assets on blockchains, can be made conditional. So you can create all kinds of conditions around compliance, identity, transferability, and various other conditions that regulators want. So I wanted to make it very clear, and I think we succeeded in that in the meeting, that data going on chain, compliance working on chain, connectivity between chains, and basically the ability to set conditions for how transactions can happen is something that can happen publicly on chain rather than having to have it be done privately within a bank's compliance department. And this is actually a really big shift because, from a regulatory point of view, instead of relying on a few select entities to run really big and costly compliance departments, what you can do is you can set conditions for how transactions have to work. And those conditions have to be met in order for the transaction to continue. And no person can decide to subvert them. So I think this was a really interesting topic that was also well received.
So you brought up the topic of tokenization, and Chainlink is really big when it comes to that. It's also been a big topic in recent days. We just had Galaxy Digital on yesterday talking about a partnership with Superstate to put that common stock on the blockchain. We've also seen non-public companies with tokenized listings on chain, which has gotten some pushback from global exchanges. Where do you stand on this trend of private companies with tokenized shares? And is it something that you've discussed with the chairman?
I think private companies with tokenized shares is a more innovative approach that seeks to circumvent the current rules and just put stuff on chain and get them out there into the world, using a transfer agent. So meeting the transfer agency rules, but maybe not necessarily meeting all the necessary requirements for everything else. I think there is definitely an interest from the SEC to update the transfer agency rules, and you can see as much from the speeches of Chairman Atkins and the different points that he and others have made from the SEC. I think once you update the rules of how you can essentially create a publicly movable and shareable equity, which is really what transfer agency is all about, then you'll see a lot more tokenization of private equity, public equity, funds, and other similar things. Until those rules get simplified, I think you'll have a few people on the cutting edge that are willing to do it and kind of hope for the best. But I don't think that the bigger institutions will take that risk. I think the smaller groups will take that risk, and so you'll have an inventory of smaller groups or smaller companies kind of doing that. And that doesn't mean that they're bad companies. I think it'll still be really high quality assets, but it won't be the large institutions or their clients until those transfer agency rules are fully updated.
It's a really good point, and it's something that I've been talking a lot about. With Superstate the other day, for example, they said that those in the pipeline are really these more crypto native publicly traded companies that are willing to jump in. But absent a rule change, or in some cases, people are looking for hard and fast rules from Capitol Hill and some sort of overarching crypto market infrastructure bill to be passed into law before they would feel comfortable tokenizing shares of a public company. But to your point, do you think that this is something that just within the SEC, a rules change on this front would be sufficient to make other institutions comfortable with getting into tokenization?
Yeah, absolutely. I already work, and we already work with many of the leading banks, institutions, asset managers, and institutional grade issuers. And I already have many personal conversations, and we have many engagements with them, planning and are already working to go into live production tokenization efforts in anticipation of these changes. And these changes are actually very technical and specific to something called transfer agency, and how tokens can be moved and how tokens can exist on a blockchain rather than having to exist in a very specific set of clearing and settlement rails and systems. And these changes are not that dramatic, frankly. I think they're pretty straightforward technical legal changes that through some amount of guidance and rulemaking can happen pretty quickly. I do think there is a kind of tsunami and growing group of really high quality issuers that are in the process of getting technology providers, getting a digital asset team being set up to do the tokenization. Because if you really look at Chairman Atkins' previous two speeches from May and July, you will see that the goal of the SEC now is really to enable tokenization. And the recent announcement you spoke about also restates that goal, is that tokenization in the US financial markets should be an easy, smooth, and riskless process. That is something that they've made extremely clear now. And I also felt it in my conversations with them, and our team is also meeting with them later today again. And we are working with them on a consistent basis to try and create clarity on what changes to transfer agency and other key rules would be the most useful for our industry. And we are receiving a lot of very real collaboration in that our goals in making the industry grow and tokenize in the US financial system are shared by them.
Mm-hmm. When do you meet with Chair Atkins again? Do you already have another meeting on the books?
We don't have another meeting set up now. These things usually get set up pretty quickly. But our team is meeting today again with them, with the SEC staff and the Crypto Task Force staff. We've had multiple meetings with them as an organization, and I fully expect us to have multiple meetings in the coming weeks, and wouldn't be surprised if I have the opportunity to speak with the chairman and others directly again.
Now, you were also at the White House Crypto Summit going all the way back to March. That was before the Genius Act was passed and before we were talking about market structure legislation in the Senate. How are you feeling 6 months on from that summit? Are the things that you're seeing come to pass in the U.S. the same things that were talked about in that meeting with the president and David Sachs?
I'm seeing a lot of progress, and I'm seeing a real commitment to moving the legislative process forward, and really getting a lot of support from the White House to move the process forward on the Hill, and not just leaving it to the respective, majority leaders and whips of the Hill. So I definitely feel and see a lot of progress and support. The Genius Act is a very clear sign of that. Market structure is something that is progressing. Had some good conversations with Tim Scott, a few weeks ago in Wyoming, about the urgency and the timeline that he has, which is for this year. Have been meeting with people from the White House. I'm going back to the White House today to meet with people there on various crypto topics. And so I definitely see a very concerted effort between the regulators, the White House, and the legislative branches, both the Senate and the Congress. I think that the interesting thing is that this is an issue that has completely now become bipartisan. I think the Genius Act had so many votes from the Democrat side in such a polarized political time. There's few issues that enjoyed that many votes from both parties on an issue. And so I think it's actually becoming a more and more safe topic and more safe agenda item for Democrats and Republicans to come together on, and a place where they can make progress and really help bolster and increase the U.S. economy, which is not a very controversial idea.
Who are you meeting with at the White House today?
So we're just meeting with the folks that work on crypto there, and trying to think through what's next, and trying to think through, what's best for the U.S. economy and the rest of the legislative process. That's what we expect the topic to be.
And what are you pushing for? If you get one item through, what would you like the White House to hear you on and really advocate for?
I'd like the White House to look beyond cryptocurrency and to look at real world asset tokenization and digital asset tokenization in order to see its massive impact on the US financial system and the global financial system. So I think there has been a hyper focus on cryptocurrencies, meme coins, NFTs, and that's all fine. And I'm a fan of all those things, and it's a great thing for our industry, and it's grown our industry to a certain point. But my view is that if the industry is currently 4 trillion, it's not gonna be defined by another 5 or 6 trillion in cryptocurrencies or NFTs or meme coins. It's going to be defined by another 10, 20, 30 trillion in real world asset tokenization, tokenization of equities, tokenization of commodities, tokenization of funds. I feel the regulators feel the same way. The SEC and CFTC, I think, have made statements now about jointly working together to clarify how tokenization can work across equities and commodities, and to accelerate that in a joint manner as well. And I think people are starting to realize that the tokenization of the financial system is the really big opportunity here. But I don't know if everyone has fully understood that the crypto thing is like the opening act, and the next the main event is going to be real world asset tokenization of equities, commodities, and funds.